Hey guys, and welcome to Unit 2, Part 2 of your video notes. We're going to go over some of the ways that neurotransmitters work with your body, how drugs and other things affect them, as well as go over some of the ways that we can study the brain and look at neurons as well. So first off, we're going to look at some of the basic neurotransmitters, which back in the day, our scientists really wanted to know if neurotransmitters were only found in specific places, how they affected our moods, did they help affect memories and mental abilities, or could we boost or diminish some of these effects with drugs. And we'll talk about what they found out. The first neurotransmitter that we're going to talk about is acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is one of the best understood neurotransmitters. Abbreviated, it's ACH. ACH is the messenger in every junction between the motor neuron and a skeletal muscle. When it's released, our muscle cells and receptors tell the muscle to contract. If ACH transmission is blocked, which happens during some types of anesthesia, we kind of become paralyzed, which is interesting. It helps, again, with muscle action, but even our memory and learning as well. If the neurons that are producing ACH are deteriorating, somebody will have Alzheimer's disease. If you are injected with black widow venom, your ACH will up. And if you get Botox, your ACH levels will go down. The next one is GABA, which helps with anxiety, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Another thing, if there's an undersupply, it's also linked to having seizures or tremors, and even insomnia. Glutamate is a major excitatory neurotransmitter involved in memory. It helps with learning as well. And it can be linked to many different psychological disorders, and including seizures. So one of the things that with glutamate, some people will avoid eating MSG because it could lead to migraines and seizures, which is interesting. Norepinephrine helps control alertness and arousal. Stress and mania will increase with higher levels of norepinephrine. An undersupply or low amount can lead to depression or a more depressed mood. And it helps regulate a state of a sleep state when it works with acetylcholine. The next one we have is dopamine, which influences movements, learning and attention, and even emotion. It helps us look for wanting a reward as well. If we have lower levels of dopamine, our bodies will produce tremors and decrease mobility, which are signs and symptoms of Parkinson's disease. If there's excess dopamine, it has been linked to schizophrenia. So right now, everybody has the same amount of dopamine. If you get slightly more, which typically happens between the ages of 17 and 25, you might get schizophrenia, which is wild. Serotonin affects mood, hunger, sleep, and arousal. An undersupply is linked to depression. Both Prozac and other antidepressant drugs help raise these serotonin levels and help regulate that. Endorphins are neurotransmitter molecules, and they help explain good feelings like the runner's high. It is a natural opiate, and this can help people when they get injured, but we're still looking a lot into this. Oxycontin is also a hormone and a neurotransmitter. It helps with the onset of lactation in new mothers, and it's only released after giving birth. And it helps with attachment and emotional bond. And one of the other cool things, dopamine is very similar to cocaine, and serotonin is very similar to LSD and ecstasy. So when they were studying how drugs affect behavior and cognition and emotion, they would give mice some of these drugs and they would react the same way as dopamine and serotonin would. One of the things you also need to make sure you write down is what an agonist and an antagonist is. So agonist, agonist, these neurotransmitters bind to receptors and mimic the actions of other neurotransmitters. So these drugs will mimic agonists. An antagonist, ANTAGONISTS, also bind to these receptors, but they block. And we're going to do an activity that will show you more what I'm talking about. So again, just shared this with you. Drugs can interfere with neurotransmitters. Some are agonists, some are antagonists. So make sure you guys know the difference between that and have that written down somewhere. Neural networks are simply just interconnected pathways of nerve cells. It integrates sensory input and motor output. Some of the pathways can take years to develop. If you think about it, you're not always the best at doing something right away. It takes lots of practice, like riding a bike. Eventually, it will click. We're going to go more into how we are studying the brain, which, depending on what sports you play or what you've done in the past or if you've been injured, you may have taken place and gone to the doctor and have had to get some of these procedures done. So, the first one we're going to talk about is a brain lesion. A lesion is just some tissue destruction. It can be naturally occurring or induced, but most of the time it can heal pretty quickly. It's like a bruise. Electrical recording, an EEG, looks for electrical abnormalities in the brain. It amplifies the waves of electrical activity. And these are measured when you have little electrodes on the scalp. a lot of times people will look at these when you're sleeping, and the way I help people remember that is EEG. Kind of looks like eggs, and you eat eggs for breakfast after you wake up. EEG used when you're sleeping before you wake up. Some of the other ones we're going to talk about real quick: X-rays, CT scans, PET scans, MRI, fMRI, and TMS. X-rays, you guys have probably experienced or see this. Reveals damage to the body. It can look at the brain and other locations. It's only a two-dimensional image, and you could be exposed to radiation, which is the downside. A CAT scan or CT scan, it is way more improved than an X-ray. It's a three-dimensional image. You take pictures at different angles and combine them on a computer. And it's almost like a slice through the body. This is really helpful with language disorders, damages due to strokes, and loss of memory. A PET scan uses metabolic changes in the brain, which is pretty cool. It's a visual display of brain activity that detects where radioactive form of glucose goes when the brain performs a given task. So you're injected with this glucose mixture, pretty much glows when different parts of your brains are activated, which is kind of cool. MRI creates a magnetic field around the person. It's 50,000 times more powerful than the Earth's magnetic field. Typically, it's just used for your head, but you can get an MRI for anything. It does create a clear picture of the brain's interior. There's no injections, there's no radiation, but this just looks at the structure of the brain, not the function. The fMRI does do the function. It allows scientists to see what's happening in the brain, like while it's actually happening. Mental activities associated with change. So when you have different levels of your blood oxygen, the glucose mixture will react, and the fMRI will pick up that data. TMS is not as popular just because it's often combined with another brain imaging technique, so we don't really talk about it too much. But this is just when magnetic coils are put over a person's head, typically at a specific area, and you use different magnetic fields to induce an electrical current to the brain. It looks for different action potentials in neurons, and then you capture a picture of it. These are the last of our notes for this slide. Hope you guys have a great day and enjoy.